What's up, Scyushi Squad? We back is more Trove. Sorry that I took a very short break from Trove, as I will address in another more serious video. Basically, the short answer to give you guys is I just didn't end up wanting to burn out because I wasn't really feeling it. But anyways, here we are again for the 35K, or I should call it 36K series, because we're at 36K PR now on pretty much every character. And today we're going to be addressing the Draco. We're going to be trying this class out in both U10 Geode Surface and then trying it out in the Delves, just because, I mean, I don't know any of you that ended up asking for the Draco specifically, but frankly speaking, it was the next class that I wanted to end up playing, and the reason for that... And the reason for that is because I didn't want to swap my physical gems off my Shadow Hunter to one of the other characters, like a lot of you have been requesting a Neon Ninja at 36K and so on and so forth, which I will definitely get around to. But the point is that I want to main Shadow Hunter right now, and the idea of swapping all my gems over, doing one video, and then swapping all my gems back just kind of feels like a waste of qubits to me, so... But before we get into it, I just gotta let you guys know the big changes as I get my timer set up here. There's been a few changes with the Shadowy Spotlight update, which is the update that ended up introducing the Shadow Hunter rework, as well as a rebalance / rework to basically every class across the board. And so that's why we're taking another gander at the 35K series, and I'm going to end up doing it for every class, because every class essentially has ended up being fundamentally changed. Some of them have very big differences, while others not so much. But Draco, for example, ended up getting a little bit stronger, more so than you would think. Draco was already a powerhouse, okay? I want to be very clear about that, but they've changed it. Just a few numbers here. So they increased the Spitfire, which is your right click. That does 230% damage up from 200, and the area effect damage of the attack, which is separate from the actual projectile itself. It's just a weird way that Trove works. Basically, picture an egg with a yolk inside it, and that's kind of the outer shell is the area of effect damage, while the projectile inside is the main projectile damage. It's just a weird way that Trove works with its code, right? That's why sometimes you'll end up tagging enemies and you see two damage numbers go off. That's because the area effect and the projectile itself ended up connecting. But anyways, they've also changed it so that the burnt offering damage has been increased from increased to 500% up from 450, which is your little bomb explosion, which already was really powerful to begin with on the Draco. So that's 50% more damage. Not static 50% over the entire class, it's 50% over what its base element was, which was 450. Anyways, they also changed it so that the Burning Ward minion, this is your little baby, right? Your Draco babies. These guys were already super duper strong, and essentially the way you play the class is you throw down all your bombs and you can get 6 babies out at a time, right? For those of you that are from years and years and years ago, you might recognize that the class gem ability of the Draco used to be a random chance to spawn the Draco babies, but it's actually been changed for a while now, where it's 100% guarantee. So you are essentially having all of your damage pop off when you have all of your babies in the sequence of attacking and so on and so forth. But anyways, they've had their damage increased to 100% up from 75%, so 25% increase to damage to them, which should end up being quite substantial. Now, as far as my gear is concerned, you know, I got maxed out gems and everything. I don't really have, you know, very good ones in terms of, like, I don't have Pyro Disc, I don't have Cubic Curtain on my Draco right now, just because these are just the magic. That's a physical gem. Why do I have a physical? Okay, one sec. Okay, there. Now I have Cubic Curtain, but point is that in terms of speed farming and stuff, we would probably end up using Pyro Disc. My gear is also set for physical. What? Okay, there. Geez, sorry. I was a little bit less prepared than I thought, just because, like, that's kind of the thing with the 35K series, is you wouldn't think so, but it's quite a bit for me to manage all of the different gear that I have on all my characters, because I basically have one set dedicated to physical, one set dedicated to magic, but at the same time, I have some sets that are dedicated to attack speed classes and so on and so forth. You guys don't need to know. But we got everything all set up now, and it seems like everything is all good. I do have movement speed speed on pretty much everything. The only difference is my staff doesn't have it. Okay, there we go. Not so bad. Not so bad. So we're at 102 movement speed, but when I have my mount with my knight subclass ability, I'm at 125. And I usually end up going in the way of taking something that's more consistent. But my point is that if we're doing this character, you know, for speed farming and stuff, we would end up building it slightly differently. Most of all, Pyro Disc would end up being mandatory. And then the ally we would be using wouldn't actually end up being Puck. Instead, it would end up being Avier, because this guy is going to end up giving us the movement speed boost and so on and so forth. Anyways, let's start the timer and let's just go, go, go. I'm sorry that that ended up taking a little bit longer than it should have. Now, in terms of, you know, I like to dedicate these sections to lagging, apparently. I like to dedicate these sections to talking about the class as a whole and how it handles situations, which it doesn't seem like we're going to be able to do that because Trove is a broken mess. Why is it always when I'm recording these videos that I start lagging like an albatross, like in heat? Like, what is going on, dude? My God. So anyways, you're trying to end up having as much movement speed as possible on a character when you're doing speed farming, just because the whole objective of the game and what Trove basically ends up boiling down to is in terms of speed farming anyways, is there's two different things. So there's going to end up being the time to kill, which Draco does have that if this game wasn't being a laggy piece of poop. And then there's going to end up being the speed with which you travel from point A to point B. So one dungeon to another, which is impossible to determine when it's lagging this badly. Anyways, I don't mean for it to distract from the video or anything like that, but it does, okay? It's a difficult thing to manage, especially because it's like when I need to record, no questions asked. That's all that we can end up doing about it, because I'm very pressed for time lately and so on and so forth. But anyways, back to the main question at hand, which is how does speed farming, right? So time to kill and distance traveled between dungeons. Now, Draco is not going to do the distance traveled very well. Generally speaking, you obviously look. I'm out there. I am out there right now because when I bomb the ground, God, it's just really interrupting today's flow, you know. Anyways, maybe I'm cranky because I have too much caffeine in my system. So, do I think that the Draco is going to end up being a good speed farmer? No, it isn't. It is going to be able to defeat dungeon bosses very quickly. Seems like somebody followed me around, so let's get out of here because I try to give you guys examples of how powerful one class can end up being with this 35k power or whatever, you know. Delves will end up being a much more decent experience than this lag fest. But the point is that Draco definitely has the time to kill up there. So long as our hits actually register, you can see that our shots... This game is so laggy that I died through death defying to... You know what? We're skipping the geode surface portion of today's video. Anyways, the short answer is you can end up maining Draco for, doing dungeons and so on and so forth if you want to, but it's entirely up to you. And I would say that there are other characters that are going to end up doing speed farming better. So anyways, we're going to be going into a 129 Delve, which this is where the class really shines. Like, I want to stress enough, or I can't stress enough, I'm not saying that the Draco is like a bad character to end up using for farming. Obviously, we have the damage output, so it's perfectly capable, and the movement speed is not awful. But again, where the class really shines is actually where it's damage, or with its damage. You can end up using Draco extremely well in Delves, because basically the end game in terms of a damaging character, that basically gets broken down into two individual subjects, which is the class versus deep delves, which is large groups of enemies and so on and so forth, which basically means that you have to have either enough damage output that you can kill the enemies quick enough that you end up surviving the entirety of the delve without losing all of your flash, or I do have unyielding, it's just not triggering. Or you have to have survivability. And basically there's going to end up being doing deep delves, and then there's going to end up being fighting against individual bosses or leviathans. Draco is one of those classes that I can say without a doubt is going to handle delves brilliantly. It's one of those underutilized classes you don't really see too many people talking about, because obviously everybody's focused on the other characters that handle the delves slightly better, which would be like Ice Sage, or even Tomb Raiser is very, very similar to the Draco. But what a lot of people might not know is that the Tomb Raiser in particular, who is a very, very similar playstyle to the Draco, did end up receiving a slight nerf. Currently, right now, Tomb Raiser is very powerful because of a bug that the devs don't seem to be aware of, which we'll end up addressing when we end up talking about the Tomb Raiser. But my point is that I like to draw comparisons between the Draco and the Tomb Raiser just because their gameplay style is so similar, where they're reliant on their babies to end up dealing high amounts of damage. And both classes also have a lot of survivability. The Tomb Raiser has the ability to end up negating damage, whereas Draco just happens to be a really tanky character. But on top of it, as you'll notice, you know, as the lag slowly ends up subsiding, my little babies are actually taking aggro away from me and towards themselves. And so long as I position myself properly, where the creatures are always attacking my Draco babies without directly attacking through them and hitting me by accident, it means that I've got the survivability. I can stay in the delve and survive, right? And that's the big thing that a lot of classes don't end up necessarily doing, because you'll end up having lots of classes that'll end up doing a lot of damage, but in order to end up surviving to the later portion of the delve and actually getting through the objective, you basically have to have insane amounts of damage that can be outputted very, very quickly and handle a group, or in this case have survivability, where I can't stress enough how I barely am putting any thought into doing this. Like, going into the delves as the Draco is like putting on an easy button. Like, you don't really have to worry about anything. I can focus very easily on my commentary without... Whoops, we're actually done and can move on. I can focus on my commentary and explaining the situation without getting overly distracted, like, say, when I ended up doing the video talking about the Chloromancer in the delves. You might have noticed, you know, in the 35k series, or the 36k series, I should call it at this point, that... the Chloro didn't handle the delves particularly well on its own, and that's kind of a big thing that a lot of people like to mention in my videos, and something that I feel I need to address is that everybody always talks about, oh, you're not supposed to be doing the delves solo. Yes, that's true, but that doesn't necessarily mean that my point is wrong. My point is that I'm trying to show you guys the true capability of a character or a class in Trove, and in which case you can already see that my Draco can handle the delves so well solo that it would only end up being better in a group, right? Whereas somebody like the Chloromancer was not good soloing the delves because of the amount of stuff that you have to manage with all your plants and so on and so forth. Chloromancer is a character that you have to have a group because you don't have the survivability, whereas Draco has the survivability and does have the damage as well. So anyways, let's just take this guy on, which shouldn't be... Yeah, I got everything all set up. Shouldn't be too much of a problem. So you can see I've got my little Draco babies and I'm constantly summoning them out. The boss is barely hitting me, and so long as I remember to actually use Arcane over and over again, we've got the damage, especially because all of my little Draco babies are, well, they're dealing like 18 mil per hit now because of that slight buff to their damage. Now, the more ideal situation would be using the cooldown ally, because then I would be able to end up using my ultimate ability, because your ultimate ability on the Draco is not only going to end up increasing your damage, but it will end up increasing your survivability. You just become that much more tanky when you're in your ult for whatever reason, but you see there that the damage just starts going whoop through the roof as soon as you end up going into your ultimate form. But anyways, I've got nothing but good things to say about the Draco. It's another one of those characters that can handle pretty much everything you throw at it. Draco can end up being a very speed character. Like, I'm sure you guys have already seen, there's some videos out there that show Draco being like one of the fastest characters, but you got to understand that what I'm setting as a goal with these videos is to give you guys an average. Okay, so this is after you've been playing for hours, you know, the amount of thought that has to go into playing the character and so on and so forth, and also a very realistic example. So Draco can only really end up being fast when you have X amount of things trigger, which includes the passive ability of the Draco that not many people seem to know about, just because it's, you know, something that nobody really bothers to talk about, which is when the Draco ends up touching fire, you end up gaining a movement speed buff. So if you end up happening to get a delve that has a lot of lava in it and so on and so forth, then the Draco might end up being a really, really speedy character. But generally speaking, that's a very unrealistic comparison. However, this is where I just wanted to mention that if you are speed farming and you aren't necessarily going for U10 geode surface, that's just kind of the example I give you guys of this is the true end game, you know, the highest difficulty in the game outside of the delves, until we hopefully end up having U10 prime uber worlds and so on and so forth. But my point is that if you are doing, you know, Dragonfire Peaks, or more specifically the Igneous Isles, the Fireland, you know, there's lava literally everywhere there. And that is an area in particular where I can easily recommend you can use the Draco as a speed farmer, and you will actually be as fast as some of the fastest classes in the game. It's very annoying to do so because you have to constantly trigger the fire over and over again, but it does end up making a difference. Just to show you guys an example, at my base value, you know, we've got 102 movement speed, and as soon as I end up touching the fire, we've got 179 movement speed. That is not including Pyrodisc triggering or our ally triggering. So I'm just saying that you can very easily end up getting over 200 movement speed with the Draco, which might end up being a lot more appealing to some people if you're farming in this particular world, or if you're in a lava delve just by chance. Okay, that's kind of the only time when you would end up using the Draco as a speed farmer. But other than that, can easily recommend the class for the delves. Not as much for the Leviathans. You do have the damage output and the survivability. Well, survivability, U10 Leviathan will just one-shot you through Death Defying, so it doesn't really matter. But my point is that you can end up maining the Draco for each category of the game, depending on how hardcore you want to dedicate your time to this class, because maybe it's your favorite class in the game. And that's why I would always recommend, you know, in these videos, is that you shouldn't end up playing a character just because it's the most efficient in a specific category. You should be playing a class because you enjoy it, because, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a video game, and why else are you playing? But anyways, thanks for watching. Thanks for being patient with me for getting these videos out slowly but surely. Smash like, sub for more, buy the merch you want to support the channel, and have a wonderful day, ladies and gentlemen.